The Big Apple, known for its tall buildings, bright lights, and otherworldly bagels, is also home to over 1,500 miles of bike lanes, which host 600,000 bike trips a day. So it's got me wondering, is New York City turning into the greatest cycling city in North America? My name is Nick, and Two Wheels Good. Subscribe for regular content. I'm convinced that New York is on its way to becoming the greatest cycling city in North America. But considering the stats I just shared, you might be thinking, why isn't it the greatest yet? It has more trips and lanes than both Montreal or Vancouver, two North American cities that frequent the top 20 global list. And the reason is there's more to being the North American cycling capital than having laid the most cycling infrastructure. But we'll get to that later. I traveled to America's city intending to make the first in a series of videos called Great Micromobility Cities, which simply needed to fill the criteria of a well-connected city made of places worth visiting. But after cruising the streets for a week, I felt that adding New York to that list would simply be disingenuous. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot to love. I personally thought it was fantastic. But to truly be a leader in micromobility and receive the title of North America's greatest cycling city, more needs to happen. So I'd like to share what I loved about cycling in the city, what I didn't like, where it's going, and ultimately why I hesitate in adding it to the Great Micro Cities list, at least for now. And the first thing I loved about cycling in New York was that it's actually possible to get from the airport into the city via walking and cycling. This is a no-go from JFK or Newark, but if you fly into LaGuardia, you can take an admittedly suboptimal 20-minute walk to 79th and Ditmars, where you will find a Citibike dock. That's what I did and was able to get to my hotel near Long Island City, but not without getting my first taste of what cycling in Gotham City would be like. Much of that 4-mile journey consisted of door-zone bike lanes and two-way cycle tracks sidelined with jersey barriers, soft-hit posts, or parked cars. This was just the start. There's an incredible amount of bike routes through the city, a system that is constantly expanding thanks to the work initially started by Jeanette Sadiq Khan. And looking at a map of the city, you can see just how extensive it is, over 1,500 miles and counting. Some of my favorite places to ride were the bridges. I always love riding bridges, mostly for the view, and in my opinion, is always a trip best made on two wheels. Sadly, I only walked across the Brooklyn Bridge, however. Almost every bridge in the city is accessible by micromobility. I really liked the emerging network in Brooklyn, some of which had some real character, but my hands-down favorite was the Hudson River Greenway and Empire State Trail along the west side of Manhattan. It spans over 12 miles and is brimming with things to see along the way. Park, a ship, that thing, the High Line, Chelsea Market, World Trade Center, finally ending at Battery Park, where you can catch a ride to the Statue of Liberty. Of course, you can't go to New York without visiting the world-famous Central Park. It's a great place for a leisurely ride due to the fact that it's been largely car-free since 2018, making the 6-mile main loop a great way to see the park on a bike. Those are some of the places I loved, all of which I rode using bike share. Now, there are many bike shops to rent from if you want to go that route. However, Citibike covers a huge swath of the city and in my experience was very reliable. I only had one moment where all the bikes at the dock were out of order. And for just $30, I was able to ride for 3 days, unlimited old-fashioned step-through bikes. But where it really shines are the electric assist bikes. For just a few extra pennies per minute, you can really fly. They are so good that I was able to convince my friend to ride them, a man who has a heart condition that prevents him from exerting too hard. His mind was blown, and we had a blast. All in all, I spent $74 for 6 days on Citibike. But it wasn't just the infrastructure and bike share I found noteworthy, it was also the people in cars. And not to paint with broad strokes, but in my experience, drivers seemed much more aware of their surroundings when compared to other places I've cycled. I even caught on camera 2 of the countless times I actually saw people check for oncoming traffic before opening doors. Also, due to the lower average speeds of traffic, I felt as though I could not only keep up with, but was given my space on streets where there was no bike facility. Lastly, not specific to New York, I was able to bypass many traffic jams, getting around not only more quickly than in a car, but was much more friendly to a tight budget. Overall, as a confident cyclist, I absolutely loved riding around New York City. However, this is the part where I talk about what I think is preventing it from reaching the global top 20 list. Starting with the scofflaws in many modes. First, reckless riders on throttle-assisted e-bikes often deliver folks speeding in the streets, bike lane or not. I was nearly hit on multiple occasions while walking and witnessed a woman get clipped as she stepped off a curb. While this is nothing new in the city, reckless bike messengers have long been a part of the urban fabric, it doesn't change the fact that it can leave a bad taste in the mouth and likely steers casuals away from hopping on the saddle. I also witnessed many loud and smelly gas-powered mopeds weaving in and out of the bike lanes, degrading the experience of each trip with each loud crop dusting. Double parked cars in the bike lanes. This is something I have found to be quite prevalent in the US. Even on my first ride from the airport to my hotel, I encountered cars in the lanes no less than 5 times, which was just the start. There were often cars, along with food trucks, curbside dining, and trash bins, among other things. And all of those scofflaws are simply the side effect of not enough enforcement and parking being cheaper than it should be. As for bike lanes, while there are many, they are not always of the highest quality. The majority of the network is made up of curbside gutter lanes or door zone painted bike lanes, with New York City Department of Transportation claiming that 644 of those 1,500 miles are protected. While I felt mostly comfortable riding with traffic and streets with or without these bike lanes, it isn't enough for the majority of riders, likely only inviting, at most, 10% of the population. There needs to be more AAA infrastructure like that of the Empire State Trail, or even this two-way cycle track in Queens. The bridges, while mostly accessible, leave a lot to be desired. More space to be specific. Take the Queensboro Bridge, for example, connecting Long Island City to East Midtown Manhattan. After opening in 1909, there were 2 pedestrian walkways on the top level, but today there are 9 lanes for car traffic and 1 lane shared between pedestrians and micromobility, which I found to be far too narrow in many places. That being said, it wasn't the worst. Lastly, while it's nice that many types of e-bikes and scooters are legal to ride, mopeds that cannot be registered with the state, electric skateboards, segways, hoverboards, and electric unicycles are not legal to ride. And as much as I love the bicycle, it's my preferred choice of micromobility when traveling, it, along with electric scooters, may not be convenient or even possible for some people to ride. I mean, I still saw people riding other forms, and I expect these laws to change. However, this simply reduces the overall ridership under the micromobility umbrella. We've seen what happened in Paris when they banned dockless scooters. The level of ridership of micromobility overall went down. This isn't an argument for dockless scooters, but the trend is clear. More options lead to more riders. And those are the most pressing issues I see keeping New York from reaching the top of the list, but a lot is still being done to improve ride quality in the city. Speed cameras, congestion pricing, the promise of building 50 lane miles of bicycle facilities a year, and enhancing 75 more miles among their aims. This all on top of the fact that New York has good topography, the city seems to already do a pretty good job of taking care of the lanes in winter, and simply being among the densest urban areas in North America with a low car ownership. And the data speaks volumes as the number of cycling trips have been rising for decades with no signs of slowing. And while that line goes up, the number of people killed or injured has been declining, likely due to the safety in numbers and the increase in quantity and quality of cycling facilities. However, I wouldn't call New York a great micro-city, failing the criteria of a well-connected city with places worth visiting. It has the places, like, does it ever? The food, the museums, the curiosities, the views, and the food. But I can't call it well connected. There is simply an absence of a true network of AAA bike facilities. It's just too sparse. And while I found pretty much every street to be rideable, bike lane or not, that is not something I would expect the average rider to be comfortable with. Back to what I mentioned in the intro, while there are over 600,000 two-wheeled trips a day, that is still only between 1 to 2% of the overall modal share, beat easily by Montreal's 4% or Vancouver's 7%. And although I hesitate to call New York a great micromobility city, and this is not a foregone conclusion, it is well on its way to becoming a world-class cycling city, if not the best in North America. I loved biking here, and even if you're not very confident on a bike, I highly recommend at least getting on 2 wheels in Central Park or along the Empire State Trail. But what do you think about cycling in New York? Let me know down below. One last thing, I'd like to address the elephant in the room. Why bike when you can take transit? It's cheaper. Like I said, I paid $74 over 6 days for Citibike when a 7-day MTA pass was just $34. And it's also more convenient and faster in a lot of cases. Well, my answer to that is why not both? The synergy is undeniable. Transit makes sense for longer journeys and cycling for the shorter trips. Not just because it can be quicker for those shorter trips, but it's probably the best way to see New York City. And to drive that point home, I'd like to quote Jody Rosen from his book, 2 Wheels Good. For all the hazards and aggravations of cycling in New York, there are those of us for whom cycling is the essence of a New York existence, who know that to live in New York without a bike is to only half experience the city, to view it at a blurry distance as if peering through the glass of a snow globe that has been given a good shake. With that, my name is Nick. Thanks for watching.